Radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Good evening. How you doing? Fade to Black. Yeah, today is Thursday, March 20th, 2025. Let's do this, man. And it's at this point on Thursday night that I say those famous words. It's my Friday. It's your Thursday. Deal with it. All right. Let's do this, man. And help support the show and everything that we do around here. Just get yourself a Fade to Black T-shirt. Easy enough to do. We have two links below, two ways to get them: Game Changer membership, or you can just order a shirt or order both shirts. Everything is autographed and includes shipping. So there you go. All right. This week on Fade to Black, another week that we are wrapping up, another amazing week. Monday night, Morgan Daimler was here celebrating St. Patrick's Day. Tuesday night, Chris Matthew was here talking about his new movie, Doors of Perception. Last night, Sean McNamara and the World of Telepathy. And tonight, Dr. Scott Kolbaba is with us. We're going to be talking about doctors and near-death experiences. Now, I have 5 major events coming up. Next week is Rise of the Guardians, March 29th and 30th, 2025 in Sedona, Arizona. We'll see you out there. The links for that are below. Then I go to the Midwest for the Contact Modalities Expo, May 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, 2025 in Delavan, Wisconsin, Delavan Lake at the resort. Then I come back out here for a Contact in the desert. That is May 29th through June 2nd, right here in Palm Springs, California. And then I head south to Peru with Brian Forrester for the Inca Celebration of the Sun, June 17th through the 27th. And that tour is sold out. We have 2 tours we're doing this year. That one is in June. The next one is coming up in November. Now, the links for that are below, hiddenincatours.com. And then I go out east for the PSI Games. This is August 1st through the 3rd, 2025 in Charlottesville, Virginia. That's right, the Psychic Olympics. And I am the game show host. The links for that are below. All right. Now, man, I was talking to Scott. I just had something very important to say and I forgot it. And I did it earlier with Scott. It was so funny. It was like really important. And it just, right? It's just so weird. And I just did it right now. And oh, I know what it was. Okay. So check this out. This week, too cold and rainy to ride my Harley. Okay. I want to ride it every day. It's my meditation. It keeps me so grounded, literally. Right. And I'm watching the weather every day, 50 degrees, it's just, and raining. And so last night, checking the weather, starting tomorrow. Now, today it's like 50. Okay. Starting tomorrow, 75, sunny and no wind. Saturday, 82, sunny and no wind. Sunday, 85, sunny and no wind. Monday, 84, sunny and no wind. Tuesday, 60 and cloudy. But I've got this like little window. I can't believe it. That's almost T-shirt weather. And I got to tell you, I'm excited. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., I'm in the dentist chair, and I'll be there for a few hours. And I'm going to come straight home. I don't care what's going on in my mouth. I can't. They're installing a smile, in case you don't know. That's why I'm at the dentist office every week. But I don't care. I'm on that Harley tomorrow. Why? Because tonight we've got Dr. Scott Kolbaba with us. We are going to have a very dynamic conversation. We are going to be talking tonight about astonishing true stories from his book, Physicians Untold Stories, about doctors, physicians, and their NDEs, near-death experiences. If you have been listening to the show for the last 12 years, you know how much I love this subject. So tonight we're going to get straight to it. His links are below, over on our website, and throughout social media. There he is, Dr. Cole. You look so official.
I've got my jacket on just for you, Jimmy.
Are you now? That looks like my dentist office. Is that? Are you? Is that where you're at right now? Not.
I'm in the office right now, so if anyone comes in and wants to get sick, I can take care of them right here.
Yeah,
I've got all the equipment.
That is too funny. Do you have office hours?
Not in the evenings. I'm too old for that. I did that when I was younger, but now that I'm a little older, I can skip the weekends and skip the evenings. Although we get emergencies. I go into the hospital that we see, but it's pretty nice not to have to work in the evenings.
What happens if there is an emergency with a patient that maybe you've known for a long time? Do you leave the house? Do you do house calls?
I do house calls. We have a kind of a strange practice. We do house calls. We see nursing home patients. If someone gets really, really sick, we just send them to the emergency room. And there's always the dilemma. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. You got a call. Someone's really sick. You send them to the emergency room. They're in the emergency room. And the dilemma is, do I go in or do I not? That's the big dilemma. You're laying in bed. It's nice and calm and comfortable. And sometimes you have that feeling. I better get in and see what's going on with this person.
Well, and here's the other. And we've got an important thing that we have to do here in a second. But here's the other thing. You decide to bail, right? You don't do it, and it's a friend, and then you bump into this person at the supermarket or church on Sunday, and they're pissed, right? What do you do then? What do you do?
Well, usually I see them the next day, but the issue is, do you get out of bed, nice warm bed, and run in? And sometimes you have to, sometimes you just have to, and sometimes you don't have to, and depends on, I've had enough experience that you kind of know. You want to make sure that when a person gets pretty close to death, that you're there to take care of them, and you kind of judge how close a person is to death. And if they're not that sick, you can let them go. But if let them go into the emergency room by themselves. But if not, you meet them there. You just have to.
And you can't use the excuse like, well, I was sick. You can't even you can't say that.
No.
How come?
You can't.
Oh, let me ask you a question. Okay,
Sure.
let's get a formality out of the way. This is going to be a great conversation. But right now, you get the first time guest disclaimer. Okay, next time you're on the show, you're not going to get it, but you get it now. Which is this, Scott? It's just you and I sitting on my couch having a conversation as friends. Where that conversation starts, it starts. Where it ends. But we're going to end as friends. Now you have to accept so we can move on.
I agree. We'll be friends.
Perfect. How come doctors don't get sick? I'm afraid of going to a hospital. Smells of infections, bacteria, and viruses. You can tell you walk, how come a doctor can go see somebody that's has an infection, strep throat, but you don't get it?
Well, I have a theory about that. I've got a theory about that, Jimmy, that probably doesn't make any sense, but I think we're exposed to such little doses of so many things that we get immunity to those things. That probably doesn't make any sense to an infectious disease doc. But I can tell you that when you rotate through pediatrics as a medical student, you get sick and you get everything for about 2 or 3 weeks. You get diarrhea and sore throats and fevers and all kinds. You name it, you get it. But after about 2 or 3 weeks, it's over, and then you're fine the rest of the rotation.
When you hear about things like a brain eating something or some kind of virus or bacteria, flesh eating, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But you're a doctor. You have to go in and treat this. And how is it that doctors don't have limbs falling off? And I've thought about that a lot. It doesn't make sense.
When the pandemic first hit, that was a real scare because we've got to go in and see these people, and you're talking to them face to face. You have a mask on, but you're talking to them face to face. So the first thing I did was go to my lawyer and make out my will to make sure that if I got this, I'd be covered.
Yeah.
And fortunately, the doctors were lucky enough. I don't think any doctor in my hospital got COVID when it was really, really bad, which is very lucky. And so I don't know. I don't understand why that is, but I think we were very careful. But we were in those rooms with those sick people, coughing and dying, and taking care of them. And it was really lucky that I don't think anyone that I'm aware of got COVID, and none of the doctors died.
Wow! You guys are heroes.
Hospital.
You guys are heroes. You guys
that was
are
a
heroes.
tough time. That was a tough time.
You guys are heroes, and just thank you, for all that you do, and thank you for putting up with me in this conversation we're about to have tonight. Okay, I'm going to ask you a strange question. It has everything to do with what we're going to talk about tonight, but I didn't. Just real quick.
Sure.
What kind of are you a general practice doctor, family doctor?
I'm an internist, so I see the anything in adult medicine. So I never know what's coming through the door. I see everything, and then when people get sick, I'm the kind of the watchman for everyone. I kind of am the captain of the ship, basically. I may not know everything about infectious disease or hearts or whatever, but I know who to call in if I need some help. So that's kind of what I do.
Okay. I just wanted to understand, and for the audience too as well. Okay. Here's where we're going to start. Is consciousness, now I've talked to a lot of chemists, biologists, doctors, physics professionals about this, and others. Is consciousness physical or non-physical?
Well, I think it's physical, but we don't know a lot about consciousness or unconsciousness. I've got a patient, actually a good friend, John Messett, who's a endocrinologist and a GYN person who was good friends with a doctor by the name of Bob, who was a family practice doc, and they became good friends. And Bob had a massive stroke one time, and he was in the hospital in the ICU. And John Messett felt terrible because he was a good friend. He'd talk with them every morning in the doctor's lounge when they had their oatmeal and whatever else was in the doctor's lounge, donuts, good things like that. And so Bob was in the ICU, and John walked in and just he was totally unconscious. And he heard the intensivist, who's the guy that runs the ICU, said, he's brain dead. He's gone. He's had a massive stroke. In 3 days, if he doesn't come around, we're going to pull the plug and let him die. So John felt terrible about his being unconscious, and he didn't know what to do. So he knew that Bob was a great fisherman. As a matter of fact, he knew what lure to use in every single river and lake in the country, in some foreign countries, and he loved fishing. So John Messett thought, I'm going to come in and just sit down with him and tell him some fishing stories. I know he can't hear me, but I'm just going to do that anyway. So John Messett started telling him about a fishing story. We went fishing in Canada near the Great Slave Lake. He caught tons and tons of fish. It was an incredible fishing expedition. And every day that he walked in, those 3 days before he was going to be taken off life support, he told him more about that story. And at the third day, he walked in, and he was too late. The room was dark. The bed was taken down, and Bob wasn't there anymore. And he thought he just missed him. He was really sad that he didn't see him before he died that day. So he went to the nurse and said, "When did Bob die?" And that nurse said, she laughed, and he was John was offended by her laughing about his death, and she said, "He didn't die. He woke up and he went down. He went down to the step down unit. He's there right now." So John Messett ran down to see him in the step down unit. He left to do some tests, and by the time John Messett caught up with him, he'd gone to the rehab unit at a different hospital. The time he caught up with him, about a week later, Bob was there in the same old place he always was, eating his oatmeal in the morning, and Messett was just thrilled to see him. And Bob had a little bit of a stutter because he lost some of the ability to speak very well. And he said, "John, thank you for saving my life." And John Messett said, "What do you mean saving your life? I didn't save your life." And he said, "You told me those fishing stories about fishing in Canada and catching those graylings near the Great Salt Lake, or the Great Slave Lake, I should say. And that, because of those stories, I decided to keep going. Instead of, I had a choice. I felt I had a choice. I could leave or I could stay. But hearing those stories encouraged me. And I decided to not go and literally die. And so I decided to come back. And sure enough, he did. He lived for another 15 years very happily. And John Messett saved his life. He was in a coma. He was nearly brain dead, but so we don't understand a lot about comas or consciousness, Jimmy. And I think that's a story that kind of illustrates that.
If we look at, can we stay here for a minute?
Sure.
Can we stay here? If we look at that, and by the way, I'm not a doctor. I just play one on TV. Okay. But I can fake my way through this.
I can too.
Thank you for that. If we look at this though, in those terms, if somebody is brain dead and there's nothing going on, there's no electrical signals, there's nothing going on, those cells are offline, then how is it that how do I say this correctly? That sentience continues.
Yeah.
Well, you hear, you remember conversations, you see things, you're out of body, you're above. And that would say to me, Scott, that at that point, consciousness is non-physical. It is now existing outside of the body. Right?
I don't think we know. Yeah, I don't think we know enough about consciousness. It's amazing, Jimmy, that you think we would know more about consciousness and unconsciousness. There's an interesting story about one of my friends who's an orthopedic surgeon that was operating on one of my patients. And during the operation, it was just a minor ankle procedure. She arrested. And they started to do CPR, but she was very heavy, about 350 pounds. So Dr. Mokel, who's the orthopedic surgeon doing the procedure, noticed that they weren't doing CPR adequately enough. And so there was a guy that came in to the room to do the CPR, had shockingly red hair, and he was doing the CPR, and he asked him to step aside. Codes are not real polite kinds of things. When he didn't step aside, Dr. Mokel just pushed him because this is a life and death situation. He pushed him aside. He started to do CPR himself. And she finally came around, went to the ICU, and survived. We thought it was a reaction to the antibiotic that she got right before the procedure. Now, when Dr. Mokel was ready to discharge her, she said, "Thank you for saving my life." And he said, "Well, it was a team effort." She said, No, I saw you push the red guy with the red hair aside and start doing my CPR, because when I was unconscious, I rose to the top of the room. And this is not an uncommon thing that you hear from out of body experiences. And she said, when I was there, I saw everything that happened. And she listed a bunch of things that only she could have known because she was there. That these are things that she couldn't have been told. There were minute little things like the color of the stethoscope on the nurse that was standing next to Dr. Mokel and things like that. And Mokel just got weak-kneed. He's just ordinary kind of a doc, doesn't necessarily believe in these kinds of things, and didn't know what to say and couldn't explain it. And then she said, "Well, I was there looking down at everything. My grandmother, who had been dead for a long time, came to me and said, 'This is not your time to go. I've saved a special place for you, but it's not time for you to go to that place. You're going to have to go back and live life and And the lady that that died was a kind of a curmudgeon, I guess, is the way you can put it. Anytime I
Sounds
saw
like
her
it.
in the office, I dreaded seeing her, because she'd say things like, "Well, how come you're 5 minutes late?" Or, "How come you didn't give me this medication?" It was just a very difficult office visit. And so when she woke up, the grandmother had told her that she needs to be kind and gentle to everyone that she's around, and then she'll be able to come to that special place with her grandmother. And after that, she was the kindest, most wonderful person in the world.
I bet
She
she
would,
was. Yeah,
she would
yeah.
she'd bake you cookies and compliment you, and it was unbelievable. So Mokul had no way to explain that near-death experience, where she actually was able to see everything, and then come back into her body, and then tell the story.
She didn't
So
like redheads, though, after
I
that,
don't
I'm
think she
sure.
did after that.
Yeah, yeah,
nor
yeah,
did
I'm sure.
nor did Mokul.
Why is it that the perception from the outside of doctors, now they can heal you and you need your broken arm set, right? Okay, we love that part. But there's a perception from the outside that doctors are a little narrow-minded, very black and white, and very pragmatic. So to think of stuff out of the box, or like a near-death experience, until it happens to them, it's BS, right? And they don't want to buy into it. And that's the general perception. Am I far off? Is the public
No,
wrong? Or is that really
no.
how it goes?
That's the general perception. When you're in medical school, you have to be very jaundiced. You have to doubt things. You have to,
Mhm.
look at the facts that you have. And when something falls out of that narrow box, then you have to doubt it a little bit. And one of the things that I was hoping to get in my book is that lots of docs have these very bizarre, unusual experiences that you simply can't explain, and that maybe we should be listening a little bit more to our patients, and accepting
Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah.
those
Well, why is it that you got
experiences.
to fall off the cliff before your mind gets changed?
I don't know. I don't know. But doctors, are trained to be very scientific and very
Right.
pragmatic, and not to listen to some of these. But what blew my mind, I interviewed 200 doctors for these stories. And what blew my mind was that the number of doctors that had these really bizarre experiences. And I've known these doctors, some for 20 and 30 years. And
Right.
these are ordinary, hardworking doctors that you wouldn't ever think would have experiences like I just mentioned. And there are lots of them. And when you tell a story like this, patients will come up with their own story and say, "Well, I've had that happen to me. I bet you've had some really bizarre experiences too." Everyone has, but the people are afraid to talk about them, and especially doctors, which is why I was shocked when doctors would come up to me, and well, I'd come up to them first and ask them if they had any unusual experiences, and they told me, some of these crazy things. And I wondered to myself, I thought for a long time, why would these doctors want to tell me these things when they have a normal practice? If you went to your doctor, Jimmy, and the doctor said, "Well, I had a dream about you last night that I needed to do this," you'd think this guy's nuts. And I think that's what the doctors were afraid of, being labeled as crazy. But
My
once,
my
go ahead.
dentist, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, she comes in, and she's great. She's just a lovely person, but she comes in and she goes, "Okay, I just want to tell you, I checked you out on social media." I said, "Oh, okay." She goes, "I love this stuff, UFOs." And I was so happy about that. You know what I mean? Her eyes are open.
Yeah,
Now, what about you though? Were your eyes closed at one point?
they were. They were. And then I started to have some of these bizarre experiences myself. And I think, and that's what got me to write this. That's what started me being interested in writing this book, because of a couple experiences that I had. I'll tell you about one. Our whole family goes on vacation every year. We love it. We've got 7 crazy kids, and everyone likes to go on vacation. And this was a vacation in Cape Cod. Have you been there before, Jimmy, to Cape Cod?
I have been to Cape Cod. Yes.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place.
It's beautiful.
We love it there. My wife grew up just off the Cape, so we have a wonderful time. We love the fish, the food. We love the beaches, everything we love. And when we go there, the men cook. And when Dad, me, pays for everything, they tend to like to have the fancy things for dinner, so it's not just the hamburgers. We're having like the swordfish on the grill and things like that. So this one night when the men were cooking, we went to the store and got some swordfish. We got some potatoes and the corn on the cob. And then we decided to have some pies. And there was a whole stack of pies that we checked out of the store. And the pies were cherry pies. And we said, well, let's get, we got 6 pies because we had a bunch of people there. We thought we'd use them for a couple nights. So we bought 6 cherry pies, and we got to talking about what kind of pies we liked the most. My mother, who had died just before the vacation, loved to cook rhubarb pie. We had a big rhubarb plant in the backyard. And as a kid, I loved to play with it and pick the rhubarb and use them as fans and things like that. But at the end of the summer, she'd pick all the rhubarb and she'd make these incredibly sweet rhubarb pies. And we went to visit her when we got older. We'd all sneak into the kitchen, and she knew what we were doing. We'd all grab a spoon, and to heck with the germ theory, we'd all dig into the rhubarb pie and we'd just demolish it. And they were delicious. And we started talking about how if my mother was there, she'd probably bake us a rhubarb pie, instead of these cherry pies. So we went home and we made the swordfish in the grill. And I must say the guys are pretty good cooks, and it was a delicious meal. And then it was time for dessert. So my wife cut up the cherry pies and she served me a piece. And I put a fork into it and put it in my mouth, and I got goosebumps up and down my spine when I put it in my mouth. It wasn't a cherry pie.
Did it taste like rhubarb?
It was a rhubarb pie.
Yeah.
I looked at the package. It said cherry.
I love
everything
that
about it, but it was rhubarb pie. So that was an experience. I knew then that my mother was looking out at us and saying, "This is I'm glad you're having fun. Know that I'm with you and having fun with you too." And so I was convinced that was her way of communicating with us from beyond the grave. And so that got me thinking. Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. No, go ahead. Got you thinking.
Got me thinking about, I wonder if other doctors have these same experiences. And, within a couple of weeks, 2 other doctors came to me spontaneously with some bizarre experiences that I can tell you about a little later on that made me think I've got to write this down. But I wasn't sure if it would be well accepted. So I doctors are like barbers. You have every person in every profession in your practice. So I had a publisher, and so I said, can I meet with you at lunchtime sometime and let me tell you some stories. So we had lunch, and I'm pretty hungry, so I'm not paying attention to what he's doing, and I'm eating like crazy and not looking at him. And I told him a couple of these stories, and then he was pretty quiet. And I looked up. He had tears in his eyes. And he said, "You have to publish these stories. These are incredible stories. You need to get this out." So that was the beginning of the book, and that's how it started.
I love that. In med school, I'm sure you guys don't have like a semester on consciousness and life after death. We don't. No, you don't. But the idea of consciousness, when I have talked to other doctors and chemists and biologists about this subject, this is what the general consensus and agreement is. Although they don't know, but in a general sense, right? That every particle has a little piece of consciousness in it. And if you amass enough of it together, then consciousness grows. So with a child through pregnancy and then birth, by the time the birth happens, there's enough of those particles in between those ears, on that baby's head, that consciousness takes hold, right? Does that sound medically sound? When you said consciousness is of the physical, it sounds like you're on that side of the fence. Is that where you come from?
A little bit, although I don't know about that theory about every little piece as a consciousness. I don't know if we know, Jimmy. I think this is such a, there's so much we don't know about the mind and the consciousness that I don't know if we know. And some of these stories I have, the doctors have experienced, tell me we don't know. The fellow that was unconscious and so presumably brain dead, ready to be taken off life support, and all of a sudden he wakes up. What was that about? Why could he hear he was brain dead?
That would suggest to me that consciousness is just everywhere. That's all. It's just like it's you breathe it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's everywhere. There was okay. Cosmology started to change again today. There was a big press release out about the expansion of the universe slowing down now instead of speeding up. Now, it's not what I'm concerned about, but I do study this a lot. And those same cosmologists and astrophysicists are now looking at the universe before the Big Bang. Okay, now, what was there? Now, check this out. This is everything that we are talking about right now. The idea, nobody knows because nobody was there, but the idea is, in a general sense, that the vacuum of space was nothing but energy. Okay. And this is before time. This is before the Big Bang. And the energy just needed something to make it go crazy. And in this case, it was a little particle that was in the right place at the right time. And then cacao, right? The universe and the Big Bang happened. But to suggest that everything was energy, to them, they are thinking about algorithms. I'm thinking spirituality. I'm thinking, is that everything that they're talking about? Is that God? Is that God? Is that consciousness? They don't want to say these words, right? They don't want to, but to suggest that everything that in all there is just energy suggests to me something very, very, very spiritual. And I think you could insert consciousness there. You can insert God. You can insert Jesus. Doesn't matter, but I think it's something that is creating stuff everywhere. And I think that's it. I think that's one of the secrets. Again, I'm not a PhD, but I think I'm close.
Well, I think as we get more and more knowledge about the Big Bang, about the universe, about the cosmos, I think more and more people are feeling that there's some universal force there, and many people call it God. You can call it God if you want to. I do, but there's something out there. And when you listen to the experiences of the ordinary docs that I talk to, and these are such incredible experiences, there has to be something else out there. And I believe there is. And I think you're right. I think there is a spiritual something out there.
I do. I really believe that. And I'm pretty secure in my position. I don't think any physicist is going to talk me off of that ledge.
I agree.
No, it's not going to happen. The other part, do doctors go to church? Are doctors spiritual?
Some doctors are and some doctors aren't. I think it's probably pretty much my friends are about half and half. Some are very religious and some go to church and some have nothing to do with church. One of my close friends who had a phenomenal experience never goes to church. His name is Steve Heim, and he had an experience that he said, if you don't believe in something after this experience, you're crazy, because he was a skier, and he was on a vacation with his wife and his wife's sister, and they were in Keystone, Colorado. They were skiing. They decided to go on. He's an expert skier, and he decided to go on this back mountain that was very not very well used. And he went up on top of the mountain. There was a blizzard that hit right when they got up to the top of the mountain. The snow was coming sideways and ups and downs, and the temperature dropped about 40 degrees, and they had to ski down. That was the only way to get down. So they started skiing. And while they were skiing, there was a grove of trees in the middle of the route, and they had to go around the trees. So the girls went to the left, and he thought the girls would follow him. A typical surgeon, I hate to say that.
Right.
And he went to the right, but when he realized the girls had gone to the left, he decided to ski through the woods. And he was an expert skier. There was really powder snow, 5 feet of powder snow. And he was skiing, and as he was skiing through the woods to get to the girls, he had this really powerful feeling in his chest. Do you ever get that feeling that you're being called on to do something that's so unbelievable that you can't even do anything but stop? And he just stopped what he was doing, and he took his skis off, and he didn't know what to do then. But he started to climb up the mountain through this 5 feet of snow. And he climbed, and, it was really a tough climb. He got about 20 yards up the mountain, and he stood in front of this big pine tree. And, pine trees have a tree well where the snow comes down into the base of the trunk. And he looked down, and he knew why he was there. There was a body underneath the tree covered with snow.
No.
And if he hadn't been standing right above the body, he would never have seen it. The guy would not have been found until the spring. So he's a trauma surgeon also. So what he did was he brushed the snow off the guy. The guy's face was gray, so he thought he was dead. But he felt his carotid artery, and he had a carotid pulse, so he knew he was alive. So he brushed him off. He did all the right things. He put his head down. He covered him up with his jacket. He started to yell for help. One of the last skiers down the mountain must have heard him and came over to see what was going on. And he said, go to the phone on the side of the mountain. Call the ski patrol, get him up here as soon as possible. This guy's dying. And so they did. About 20 minutes later, the ski patrol came. They had a snowmobile. They came up, loaded him on the gurney, brought him down to the lodge where the ambulance was waiting, and rushed him off to the hospital. Steve, at this point, was shaking with adrenaline because this was an incredible experience that he had. And he ran over to the other side of the grove of trees. The girls happened to be still waiting there, huddled together. They all skied down the mountain together, and he got to the lodge, and he was rewarded then for his efforts with a cup of hot chocolate. The next day, he called the hospital. The guy lived, and he was doing well. Steve splinted his broken leg, with a tree branch and some of his underclothes, and the orthopedic surgeon was very impressed with his efforts to bind the leg together. So what, and Steve, like I said, is not a religious person, but when he told me this story, he said this had to be something that I can't understand. It's got to be from above. And the interesting part of that, though, Jimmy, was he 2 years before, he was skiing with his father. His father had a cardiac arrest on the slope. Steve rushed him down to the first aid station where their doc was waiting there, and they did CPR for an hour, and he died. And since that time,
wow,
Steve felt guilty that he couldn't save his father's life. He thought he was inadequate, and he was living with that burden for 2 years. And after he saved this individual's life on the same kind of circumstance, he felt that he had been saved that day too. Not only had he saved the guy in the tree, but he had been saved himself, because he no longer felt guilty that he couldn't save his father's life, and he realized.
One would say, I just interrupted a doctor.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm going to get struck by lightning here live on the show, but one would assume that the guy that he rescued received the gift. No, Steve got the gift.
There were two gifts that day.
Yeah.
And Steve said, the guy that I saved got the gift, but I got the gift also. And that's not uncommon. When you do some good in the world, it's not uncommon to have that come back to you. And this literally saved Steve's life, because he could now function and operate normally and was back to his old self. But
have you had an NDE yourself?
I've had a number of interesting experiences with death. I haven't died myself, but there were a number of experiences. One with my daughter that nearly died. I can tell you that one if you like.
I'm a dad. This is gonna crush me, but yeah, we all want to hear the story.
So my daughter was in show choir, and show choir you dance on platforms, and you also sing at the same time. So she had a big tournament in Onalaska, Wisconsin, which is about 4 or 5 hours from where we live in just outside of Chicago. And so they got on the bus, and we decided to follow the bus about an hour later. And about 2 hours into the trip, I got a call from Lucci, and she said, "Dad, we had a little fire on the bus, but it's okay, we're fine, and no problem at all." And so, I didn't think much of it. And so about an hour later, when we would have gotten to the point where she was calling us, we were about an hour behind the bus, we saw all these squad cars, fire engines off the side of the road, and there was a bus that was belching this big black smoke.
No.
And what had happened was that the back tire had gotten flat, and a piece of rubber kept going around and around and around, and caused enough energy and friction to cause a fire. And the fire started pretty quickly, and it spread through the bus. And all of a sudden, the girls realized there was a fire. The second bus behind that first bus, all the kids in that bus were texting the kids in the first bus and saying, "Your bus is on fire, get out, get out." Well, they couldn't get out the back because it was all in flames. So they had only one way to get out. The bus filled with smoke. The floor was hot. The girls were screaming. My daughter was one of the last kids on the bus. And as they pushed to get out the front door, the flames were licking on the side of the bus. The flames were going up and on the side of the bus and the bottom of the bus. And all of a sudden, the kids in the second bus said there was something that they just couldn't explain. It was like a giant hand covered the bus. The flames died down until all the girls were able to get out. And then a wave of flames came through the bus and destroyed everything in the bus except the girls. The last girl that jumped out was saved. And it was just an incredible experience. They knew there was something more than just luck. It was something that happened that extinguished those flames for enough time for the girls to get out of the bus.
You know what my reaction is?
What?
Well, first, joy. My daughter's fine, right?
Yeah.
You know what my second reaction is?
What's that?
You're riding in our car from now on. No bus. Get in the car. Get in the car. Because you want to protect.
Yeah. That was on the national news. It was really something.
Woo!
The interesting thing, though, Jimmy, was when they got to they had a third bus to pick them up. They got to the hotel. It was just like 2:00 in the morning.
What did I just tell you? There's no third bus. Get in the car.
The show choir director, who was a little bit naive, said, "We're going on tomorrow. I don't care what happens. All the clothes are destroyed. Everything's burned up, but we're still going on the stage, and we're going to do the job." So there were 50 girls. Or 40 girls, I guess. They got some uniforms. The principal of the school, one of his daughters was on the bus. They went to the high school, our local high school, found 25 uniforms. So they brought them with them. The next morning, they found 25 more uniforms that were contrasting uniforms at the school, on Alaska School. They were able to, my wife was the seamstress, and she was going crazy putting duct tape together and safety pins and everything else. And they had matching sequined outfits. One was purple, one was silver. They looked absolutely beautiful. They went on stage, and the song was from Jimmy Eat World about the middle, and that you'll be okay. And they picked that song out months before, and the audience was in tears, and they won it all, Jimmy.
As it should be, and that's the universe. Don't ignore the universe. Just don't. The universe is slapping you upside the head all the time, and so many people ignore it. Don't. No. That stuff is right.
That's one of the lessons.
Yeah. I was born in Chicago.
Oh, you were?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. We live in Wheat, which is just west of Chicago.
Where are you at?
Wheaton.
Oh,
About
you're
20
in
miles
Wheaton.
west of Chicago. Yeah.
I was born in Waukegan.
Okay.
And lived at Fort Sheridan. I was born at Great Lakes Naval Station, if you know where that is.
Sure.
And and so I was born that Fort Sheridan didn't have a hospital. So, all of us Army kids were born up at Great Lakes. Anyway, so North Chicago, that whole area. Yeah, absolutely. All of my paranormal stories that I tell when I was a kid, Chicago, they all happened there.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that part of the world. Here's the thing. When Eben Alexander had his experience, and he is just in a position where you can kind of gauge where the medical community is with this, because friggin' brain doctor, right?
Yep. Neurosurgeon.
I don't know. Yeah. I have no idea how many years of school are involved with that. But if somebody's going to cut into my head, you better have worn your teachers out, right? Okay.
They go to school a long time.
A long time. And Eben's one of those cats. And for Eben, and it's funny because you hear him talking, he goes, "No, man, before my experience, I didn't even think about this stuff."
Yeah.
I was
That's true.
Yeah. I was worried about my hands, the thing of, and I get, and that's what you want from a brain surgeon. You need to have somebody dedicated. Well, there's only so much time in the day, and you're not going to think about something that is probably something you consider intangible.
Yes.
Right? I can't see it. I can't feel it. Can't measure it. I'm not going to think about that. I need to think about brain surgery. And then it happened to him. Right? And it changed everything about him. And I think that's why your book and hearing from doctors is so important, because you can change the mind of somebody in our community. Somebody's just woken up, right? And that's easy. That's fish in a barrel, right? That's low-hanging fruit. But to get somebody like Eben Alexander or the professionals that you interview, that's different. That's paradigm shifting, career changing, world changing stuff, isn't it?
It is. And that's why I wanted to bring it out, because these are ordinary doctors that you can see every day, and you think about them as being very scientific and very matter of fact, and don't think about these kinds of paranormal or spiritual experiences, but they have them. And lots of docs have them. And I think this book, at least for the docs that were in it, allowed them to, they realized that they weren't ostracized by their patients at all. As a matter of fact, many of the patients were very happy that they expressed these experiences, and they felt the patients felt like they could now open up with their experiences. And it's been remarkable. It's been incredible. And the doctors were very surprised that they didn't get any feedback that was negative about this.
Yeah, I love that part of it too. Now we all wonder, because we all hear the same stories, not the same, but the same types of stories from people that have NDEs, light at the end of the tunnel, right? The life review, the checklist. Are they in heaven or not? Did they see God? Did they talk to God? Well, not all near-death experience are those, but we hear about that a lot, and it's fascinating. What about doctors? Are their experiences different, or do we have, the classic light at the end of the tunnel and the voice of God?
I think they have similar experiences to everyone else. I think when it comes to this, I don't think doctors are any different than ordinary patients and ordinary people. We have Noemi Sigalov, who's a surgeon, tells an interesting story about two of the doctors that she took care of. Doctors obviously take care of other doctors, and she took care of a couple, Ron and Adele Ashton, and they were missionaries, doctor missionaries in Africa their whole life, and they were very had incredible stories, and Noemi would say that when she saw them, she always spent more time because they told her about things that they were doing that she read about in books but never had experienced, and they were always concerned about her. How's your well-being? Do you have a testimony? Do you believe in something? And Noemi really didn't think about spiritual things very much at all. And Ron Ashton said, someday you'll see the truth. Someday we will let you know that there's really something else out there. And she said, that's fine. And then she lost contact with them for quite a while. And she was going on a trip because she was all burned out. She was going to Arizona for a 3-day trip. And she had to make rounds in the hospital really early in the morning. It was like 5 o'clock in the morning because she had to operate on someone the night before and had to see them before she left on their airplane. And as she opened the hospital door, there was a puff of air that came out, and she felt like she was in a different plane. And all of a sudden, she saw Ron Ashton there in her vision, and he was smiling at her as if he was showing her as if he had achieved the ultimate success in his life. It was that smile of success, and then he disappeared. And she thought, I don't know what this is, but I've got a trip to get and so forth. So she went on the trip, and when she was coming back, she read a little blurb from the email, because she doesn't like to look at her emails when she's on a trip because it can be upsetting sometimes and spoil your trip. And then on the way home, she said, we regret, the medical vice president of medical affairs wrote to all the doctors, we regret to let you know that Ron Ashton passed away the morning that she was leaving on the trip, like an hour or two before she saw him. And she realized that the expression on his face told her that he had achieved the ultimate in missionary work, that he was the ultimate missionary to show her that there was something beyond life, and that he was proof of that. And so she changed her life. So.
Wow.
So doctors have those experiences too, just like everyone else, but they're all different, Jimmy, as you know. It's not necessarily seeing God, or not necessarily bright lights, or the end of the tunnel and those kinds of things. I think it's all very different.
Check this out. This is from Bill, I'm going to say my lead moderator. Bill's been with this show for, I don't know, almost 10 years. I've known Bill a long time. Mm-hmm. He says here, in my NDE, I saw that light at the end of the tunnel. And as it got closer to me, I recognized it as an eye. Eventually, my eye, the right one, to be specific. That's interesting. Have you heard anything like that? And also, as you accumulate 200 doctors, that's a pretty good pool. All right. Mm-hmm. That's I would say that's a lab test. Yep. You can get something out of that. Do things tend to overlap with their experiences?
Yes. Yeah, there are some things that tend to overlap, and we were talking about that just before the show. One of the things that one of my patients, one of my doctor friends experienced was a fellow that was bleeding to death, literally bleeding to death from a suture that came loose on a fistula. A fistula is a connection between the artery and the vein, and when they, it's a high pressure system with the artery pumping blood out.
That doesn't sound good. That's a pipe leak.
Good at all.
Yeah, that's a pipe leak.
And he arrested, obviously, at home. He was brought to the hospital, and as he was brought in, he was full of blood. The paramedics were on top of him doing CPR, and the doctor there had to make a decision: do I save him or let him go? Because it'd been a long time that he'd been literally without any blood. And they decided to go ahead, so they transfused 4 units of O negative blood immediately. And after about a couple hours, he came around. And he opened his eyes, and he said to her, that was Dr. Mraz, that was the attending doctor there. He said, where's the music? and and she said, well, we don't play music in the emergency room. And he said, no, I want to go to that room where you had that beautiful music. There were some instruments I've never heard before, and I want to hear that music again. And so he finally realized that, the music wasn't the ER, he was somewhere else. And I think he was he said he was in a white room. It's a very beautiful white table, just sitting there. I didn't see God, but he just had this beautiful music. And I think your story was very similar to that. So I think there are many stories that are very similar, some very different, but some are similar. And this one, I think, for you and Dr. Mraz, were very similar.
Well, so. I didn't meet. I was alone.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see anybody else. I didn't bump into, any dead relatives, or it wasn't like, what was that movie? What Dreams May Come. Great movie, by the way. But no, I didn't run into anybody, but loved it. I mean, it was nice. I don't know how to explain it. Now, and here's, we can talk about this more after the break. I know that people should hear these stories because we all have this fear that's part of our DNA because of the unknowing, right? It's, and no proof of anything yet. So I get that. But let's say there is proof of an afterlife or something, some type of continuance. Does that take the importance out of your time here? Right? And what if somebody's buried in debt, right, or whatever, and they're just like, they've got some kind of chronic pain, whatever it may be. They go, well, you know what? It doesn't really matter. I don't think that's a good thing.
I think when you think about this as a spiritual thing, it does, what happens in this life, it becomes less important. Your debts, your being out of money, your not getting along with someone, those things don't seem to matter. And when you consider that there may be something else that's just very beautiful that awaits us, and lots of people have had those experiences, and I think that's probably very reassuring and takes away some of the sting and the fear of death.
Yeah. That's the way it should be. I have a Pandora's box that says, I crack that open and that's not the way people are going to look at it. Did you interview a doctor that was an atheist and then a week later is going to church and kicking in the donation basket every Sunday?
I don't think anyone was a true atheist, but there were many people that were, just show me agnostics. Show me. I'll believe if I see. And that was Dr. Siegeloff. The lady that saw the ghost of Ron Ashton. And afterwards she was changed. But so I don't think anyone was a true atheist. But people, when they have these experiences, are changed. You have to be.
Yeah.
So
something I repeat a lot, like a broken record. But I'm going to ask you a question. Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Who is the most spiritual person in the world? Now you just say, I don't know, Jimmy. Tell me.
Tell me, Jimmy.
The physicist when the plane is going down.
Oh, that's
it's a guarantee. It's a guarantee. Mm-hmm. It's a guarantee. Yep. I was just joking this whole time. But yeah, I think most think about these things because the magic of consciousness, of happiness, sadness, the birth of a child, and the magic of everything is not because of chance. It's not. And so the question of something else existing outside of our 2D experience, right, is real.
Yeah, I think it is.
And I think scientists think about it all the time. They just can't talk about it.
I think we get close to that when we have experiences like the birth of a baby, the sunrise, nature, going out in the world. I think those are things that draw us close to the spiritual force that's out there. I'd call it God, but you can call it whatever you want, the universe or whatever. But I think things that bring you to, the music that brings you to tears, brings you, I think, closer to that spiritual force or that God that's out there. So.
Let's take our break right here. We've got too much to cover tonight, so let's get the break in. Our guest tonight, Dr. Scott Kolbaba, is with us, and tonight we are talking about doctors. He's a doctor that have had near-death experiences. So all of that and much more when we come back. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Stay. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and get the Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. Watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's Fade to Black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's now called X, but who cares? How you doing? Jimmy Church here. Special announcement. Get your Fade to Black T-shirts. That's right. Help support the show. Help support everything that we do over here. We've got 2 T-shirts. We've got 2 ways to get them. Get your Fade to Black T-shirt today. Go Backley Tappy. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut. Today we're headed to Bolivia, Tiwanaku, Peru, and of course, Pumapunku. Brian, exciting. Thank you so much for everything, my friend.
Always an honor. Right behind us is the sacred river of the Inca that goes past Machu Picchu. So we're going to be driving up to its source at 15,000 feet above sea level and then down to Lake Titicaca.
So today we hit 15,000 feet.
Yes.
Crazy. And you can do it with us. All you have to do is go to hiddenincatours.com. Simple. We've got 2 tours coming up next year, one in June for the summer solstice, right? And then another one right here in November. So hiddenincatours.com. Come and hang out with Brian and I and his amazing team.
Right on.
River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back, Faded Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Dr. Scott Kolbaba is with us, and we are talking about doctors that have had NDEs. And Scott, have you known a doctor that was self-centered, cocky, and abrasive, and then NDE comes into play, and then afterwards a complete personality flip-flop? Have you encountered that? Oh, you're muted. Unmute yourself. You have to do it down on the bottom. You
There we
click
go.
there.
How's that?
Okay. Yeah, there you
Yep.
go. Okay.
I've not experienced that with doctors, but I've experienced that with patients that have that experience, and that was one that we talked about earlier. So people they do change when they have those experiences. But I think the doctors, when they have experiences where they are facing patients that have these really bizarre experiences, or they see a ghost or something, they are changed themselves. So there's a
Well,
number of
and
docs I can tell you about.
one of the things, yeah, I want to hear that. One of the things in this community that we have, when I say this community, we're just open-minded. So you just throw that umbrella over the top, and then underneath that, everything is there. And, NDEs are one of them: consciousness, science, UFOs, ET. Throw some Bigfoot in there, right? Okay, all right. That once you have an experience, maybe you've had doubt about anything, but you have an experience that one would say is supernatural, like an NDE, right? It definitely
Mhm.
falls into that category.
Yep. Yep.
But once that happens, man, everything starts happening, right? You start seeing
True.
flying saucers or whatever. Does this happen with doctors too, as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There was a lady that I know that her husband was my good friend, a doctor, Dr. John Heitzler, and he's an obstetrician, and his wife was delivering their fifth child, and she did really well through the delivery, um, and she was quite close to her grandmother, Grandma O'Hanlon. Grandma O'Hanlon was a little old lady that was a midwife, and she came from Ireland when there was a great upheaval with the Catholics and the Protestants, and her father was keeping the priests in her secret places in her house, and so he sent her to the United States to grow up, and she became a midwife. She was the spiritual leader of the family. She was incredible, and when she got older, she couldn't be a midwife anymore, so she lived with Joan and her mother. It was Joan's grandmother, Grandma O'Hanlon, and so she was quite a spiritual person. And when Joan got into trouble with her mom, she'd always make it to the lap of Grandma O'Hanlon, and she'd say, if I made it to my Grandma O'Hanlon's lap, I was safe. And so she was delivering the baby. Everything was going well, and the baby was delivered. But afterwards, she had a lot of pain, and they were doing a procedure because there was some retained placenta, evidently, and so they had to do some procedures. So they decided to give her some medication to put her to sleep, so that she wouldn't experience the pain. The drug was called Trilene at the time. So as they were about ready to administer the Trilene, when Grandma Hanlon stepped into the room with the two obstetricians and a bunch of nurses, and here's the midwife that walks into the room. She's dressed in her usual polka dot dress, a little apron, her hair up in a bun, little old lady shoes, and she signaled to Joan, "Don't take that Trilene." And so Joan pushed it away, and no one knew that Joan had eaten a large meal right before the delivery. And within a minute of pushing that Trilene away, that would have put her into sound sleep, she vomited the whole meal. Had she been unconscious, she would have aspirated that and may have died from
Right.
aspiration. So she said afterwards, she was a changed person. She said, "I made it to Grandma Hanlon's lap one more time, transcending time and space, because Grandma Hanlon had died 22 years before."
We hear this over and over again, and so many go, well, and they want to explain it away, right? It's in some mundane, dogma-filled, right, diatribe,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
not That's simply not the case. And so many, not just doctors, but I want to talk about doctors specifically here, but so many ignore coincidences and synchronicities.
Yeah.
I think, and doctors, I think ignore them more before their NDE because of their training and their medical background.
For sure.
And they'll explain away there are no coincidences, by the way. Coincidence is something you need to pay attention to. But doctors won't, because they're so, I keep saying, black and white, right? And because of their education and background. But this stuff comes into play, doesn't it?
It does. It does. Coincidences happen all the time. It's amazing how many coincidences. And I think after people start reading about some of these stories or learn about some of these things, they'll pay attention to the coincidences that happen in their life. I had a coincidence that I didn't think about for years and years until I was writing this book, and I realized what a phenomenal coincidence this was.
Well, what was it? Don't leave me hanging.
I was trying to get into medical school.
Okay.
And my grades weren't wonderful in college. I wasn't a great student in college, but I eventually turned the juice on and started to study. But I had to get into medical school. I had by this point I'd been fooling around for 2 or 3 years, and I had to get a job because I had a family already. So I had to get a job. So I couldn't spend any more than 1 year trying to get into medical school, and I had to take organic chemistry. And I lived in Chicagoland. Organic chemistry is a killer course, as you probably know. That's the stuff
just the title of the course is intimidating.
So I was working a part-time job during the day, so I couldn't take it during the day, so I had to go to night school. So there were 2 schools that offered organic chemistry at night. One was at Roosevelt University downtown Chicago, and one was at Aurora University. And I was delighted that it was available at Aurora University, because I worked in Aurora, and I lived in DeKalb, which isn't too far away. So it was perfect. So I went to the bookstore. There were tons of books there falling off the shelf. I grabbed the book. I went to the class. There were 3 kids in the class. The professor walks in and says, "I'm sorry, we're canceling the class. There aren't enough kids." I almost died, because I knew my career was over. I would never be a doc, because I couldn't get into the organic chemistry. So I had to give up my career as a potential doctor. But then I realized it was offered at Roosevelt University downtown. So the next morning, I gave some lame excuse to my boss, drove down to the Roosevelt University downtown, waited in line for the registrar, and I said, "I need to get into organic chemistry, because if I don't, I'll be a failure in life. I won't become a doctor," and so forth. And she said, "I'm sorry, we have 1 class in organic chemistry." Then we opened up a second one, and that one's already filled, and there are 8 or 9 people on the waiting list. I'm very sorry, you'll not be able to enroll in organic chemistry. And I thought, oh, my life is over. I was desperate. So I said, well, who is the person that decides who gets into the class? And she said, it's the professors. And I said, well, where do they live? And she said, upstairs, 3rd floor, room 202. So I went upstairs, room 202, and there were people all over the room, I think asking for the same thing I was. And I must have looked like a sad sack, because the secretary, there must have been a tear in my eye, and the secretary said, "Okay, if you want to talk with the professor, the 2 professors are meeting right now in their office. Just go to the anteroom. If you're only going to take 3 minutes, go sit in the anteroom, and then as soon as they come out, you can talk with them, but you can't spend more than 2 or 3 minutes." So I said, "Okay." Everyone gave me a dirty look as I walked to the anteroom, because I think they were trying to do the same thing I was. And as I was sitting there, they were talking, and they were saying, "It's crazy. We can't find any organic chemistry books. We opened up this new class. There's 30 kids, and the publisher doesn't have any books. All the universities in the area don't have any books. We're just out of books. I don't know what to do." So they talked for a little while, and I could hear them, because the door was very, very thin. And I didn't want to listen, but I obviously you did. So the one professor walks out. The other one signals for me to come in. So I walk in, and I said, I'm need to get into organic chemistry, otherwise I'll be a failure in life. I won't become a doctor, and so forth. And he said, I've got look outside, the whole waiting room is people with the same circumstance that you are. I'm sorry, we can't offer you a place. And then, my heart was aching, and I realized I had to do something desperate. So this is a desperate situation. So I said, "I understand you need some organic chemistry books." And all of a sudden he made eye contact with me, and I said, "If I can get you books, will you let me in the class?" And then he looked up, and it seemed like it was hours and hours waiting for him to say something. And he said, "Can you get me 30?" And I said, "I can get you more." And he said, "You're in the class." Now, Jimmy, what's the likelihood that I would be there listening through that door at that very moment when only I could help them and only they could help me?
But even way beyond that, that's perfect. But just the fact that you walked into that bookstore, right?
Yeah.
And you were looking that, I love that about life, because you can go backwards and go, well, I guess it was because I decided to cross the street that day, because had I crossed the street, I wouldn't have bumped into the professor or whatever it is, right? But then you go, wait a minute, but why did I decide to cross the street? What happened right before that? Something else, right? And you can go back, and your life is full of those life-changing coincidences and synchronicities. And if you don't click, if you don't click, you're not here tonight.
Yeah.
That's a fact.
And I think lots of people have those, and they don't realize. I didn't realize that was a phenomenal coincidence until I started writing this book, and I thought, I've had that happen to me. That was a divine moment.
Yes.
And I think lots of us have those, and I think it'd be nice to have people realize that they're being given a gift, an unbelievable gift, to have a coincidence like that.
I do it all the time. I talk about it on the show, where if I am presented with, I'm going to use the word divine, some divine circumstance that just falls in my lap, and I am able to do something at that moment, whatever it may be, and I do it. When I walk away, most people will say, you gave that person a gift, right? No, the gift was to me, and that's the way I choose to, I stop and I go, universe, thank you for that gift.
Yeah.
I know I made somebody happy. Okay. All right. But no, man, my ego needs to be fed. I need to be service to others, and I need to be able to thank the universe. I need that adrenaline rush, and so many ignore those opportunities that are just like right there in front of them. You could have let that pass you by. And so the gift wasn't you taking the class. The gift was all those students that got books. That was the gift.
Yeah.
Right. And now what? Okay. I'm going to ask you something strange.
Sure.
Doctor has an NDE. Have you heard of a doctor suddenly, because of it, with psychic abilities? Maybe they can see the future. Now they're precog. Now they're clairvoyant. Has that happened?
I haven't run into that in my collection of doctors that I've seen. But I think doctors that have experiences are more aware. That's what I'm seeing, is they're more aware of these experiences. And just like me, I wasn't aware of this coincidental thing that happened to me with the books until I had some experiences of my own. But I think once you start to have some experiences, you are aware of the multiple experiences, the multiple miracles that happen to you virtually every day. And so I think that's what happens to myself and to other doctors that have these experiences.
Okay, I've got two quick questions. Have you ever had a doctor, I talked about UFOs, right? But that has his NDE, and then you go up to him and go, so about your NDE, well, that's cool, but man, last night I saw a flying saucer. Is it, you know what I mean? Is it like that, where suddenly the awareness of what is around them is more present?
Yeah, I don't think we've had any flying saucer experiences, but I think, the awareness is very, very present.
Yeah.
And these doctors are aware of of a spiritual presence that they didn't have before when they had these experiences.
Yeah. And now what about, this is the second question.
Yeah.
Have any of the doctors that have had the NDEs had a premonition about it? Did they
Oh, yeah.
know that this was coming? Oh, really?
Yeah. They're premonitions that happen all the time. Let me think of a couple good premonitions. Let's see. I had a doctor that knew a judge really well, and the judge was his best friend. This is a good friend of mine who's a surgeon, and he Rich Jorgensen is his name, he was meeting with a kind of a psychic person, and the psychic person says, Rich, if you ever have a dream, you need to be aware that if it's about somebody, you need to tell them about that dream. And Rich thought that was an interesting thing, but he said, I never have any dreams anymore. Well, one night, a few months later, he had this incredible dream about the judge, Judge Glasso, true story, that he dreamt that he had died. Judge Glasso had died, and he was in the funeral home, and he was waiting in line to see him. And it was a very vivid dream. And when he woke up, you know how most dreams are, you wake up, the dream is gone, you forget about it through the day. But this was a dream that stayed with him, that was so real that he couldn't stop thinking about it. So he called him up that night, thinking about the person that told him what he needs to tell somebody about the dream that they had about him. And so he called the judge up and he said, Judge, have you had a physical lately? And the judge said, well, no, I don't see doctors very often. So he said, well, would you do me a big favor? I dreamt that you died. And the judge laughed. And he said, well, okay, would you just do me a favor and go get a physical? So he went and got a physical. And about a week later, he called Dr. Jorgensen back up and he said, I got my physical. I did EKG, chest x-ray labs. The doctor pronounced me perfectly healthy, and I'm perfectly fine. And then Rich got that bad feeling inside his chest, thinking that, there's something awful going on here. We need to do something about this. So he said, would you do me a favor and just get one more test? It's a heart scan, just to see how much calcium you have in your coronary arteries. Well, he said, the judge said, come on, Rich, I had my physical. I did that for you, and now you want me to do something else. And Rich said, please just humor me. So he did. He got the scan. It was an incredibly abnormal scan. He was admitted to the hospital immediately. He had an angiogram the next day. He had what's called a widowmaker, which is a big lesion in the main artery that supplies most of the heart. And those cause death usually within about 90 days or so. It's an amazing tragedy that happens with that. And so he was the surgeon saw him. He had a bypass surgery the next day, literally saved his life. And so Rich, after that, realized that he needs to pay. He needed to pay attention to the things, that the premonitions and the dreams that he gets, because they're sometimes really, really true. And he really stuck his neck out to make his friend go for 2 different tests that he would have felt really bad if everything was perfectly normal, and why he was being so silly like this. But so I think the bottom line is premonitions happen all the time. We need to pay attention to them, and we all have those.
What about a doctor that had a premonition of their own death?
I don't think I've run into that so far, but I think that happens. But then the doctors I interviewed, there were premonitions of other people dying. I had a guy that I saw preoperatively. He had a stress test. Stress test was perfectly fine, but he called me up about an hour after the stress test. And he said, I've got this backache. And I was ready to say, well, take some Advil. And, it's from the treadmill stress test. You're not used to being on the treadmill. But I had this funny feeling that there was something really wrong with him. And I couldn't explain it. And so I said, I'm a little worried that you may have something that's serious. I'm things like aneurysms can happen and cause back pain. So I'd like you to go right to the emergency room and check yourself in. And he laughed at me. He said, I've just got this backache. Can I just take some Motrin or something? I said, no, you need to go right to the emergency room. So his wife took him right to the emergency room. He had a rupturing abdominal aortic aneurysm on the spot. He was taken right to surgery. They gave him 6 units of blood because he had blood throughout his abdomen, and they saved his life. Had I said to him, don't bother, just take some aspirin or whatever for your backache, he would have died, no question, because he was just barely alive when they got him to the emergency room. So we have premonitions all the time. You need to listen to them. And there's a number of docs that have had premonitions, and myself also, about those kinds of things. And if you listen to them, sometimes they really are true.
What about the power of the mind in healing yourself? What's your take on that?
No question. They've done lots of studies that people that with cancer, for example, they've done a lot of studies on people with cancer, and people that have cancer. The ones that have a positive attitude, that have a good positive sense of well-being, will always do better than people that think they're dying. And it's a known fact that people that are depressed tend to have higher incidences of diseases like cancer. So there's no question that the mind plays a tremendous role in health, and positive attitude makes a huge difference in any disease or in health. So there's no question about that.
Yeah, the mind is powerful.
No question.
I often say, and you're a doctor, all right, but I'm just going to say this to you.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason to go to the doctor. Get in a car accident, you smash your face, you go see a doctor. You break your arm skiing, right? You go to the doctor. There is a reason to absolutely 100% go. But I think so many go to the doctor for no reason, and then with the power of the mind are causing issues in their body. And I think that is is it a phobia? Is it, it's some kind of addiction, and maybe not going to the doctor is healthier than going to the doctor for many people. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. We find lots of things when people, come to a doctor on a regular basis. We find many things that will literally save their life, and or alter their overall longevity. I do that all the time. We do physicals, and it's amazing some of the stuff we bump into. That colon cancer is one. Colon polyps, for example. About 80%, 70 to 80% of people in a lifetime, from my experience, will develop colon polyps, which are precancerous. And if we don't take the polyp out, that will turn into a cancer within a 10 or 15-year period of time. So, doctors, I think, can make a big difference in people's overall longevity and health. You always hear the story about, oh, my grandfather smoked, he ate eggs for breakfast, he lived to 95, and he was perfectly fine. That's the exception. Most people need to have some little tune-up every once in a while, and that will make a big difference in their overall longevity.
Well, I'm the eggs for breakfast, smoke, and I have whiskey for lunch. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But I am at the point in my life. I've started to focus a little bit, not much. I haven't done drastic changes, but I have started to look at what I eat and how much I eat and some of the other things. But I'm not ever going to give up pizza. It's not going to happen. I'm not giving up steak. These are the things that make me happy. And I think that is a benefit, more of a benefit in the long term.
It doesn't take, yeah, you're right. It doesn't take much to stay healthy, and you can still have pizza and steak. There's a few little things that you can do. A little bit of exercise, a little bit of high fiber in your diet.
About now, I want to get back to near-death experiences.
Sure.
But I'll say this, since you're a doctor. All right. 3 or 4 months ago, I came back from Peru, and on the plane coming back from Peru, I felt something funky with my left eye. Okay. So I come home, I go to bed. The next day, I wake up and I went, it's itching. okay, I went and I looked in the mirror and it's red. There's no white. It's red. And I went, oh shit. Right. Like I'm going
hemorrhage.
I'm going to the doctor.
Yeah.
So I go, turns out I had a bacterial infection. All right. So that's not the story. The story is they take my blood pressure and my weight and some other things. And my doctor comes in, he goes, man, since the last time you were here, your blood pressure, it's like, it's gone up. I said, oh, really? He goes like, dude, is your left arm numb? You know, that kind of thing. I mean, he was being serious too.
Yeah.
And I said, really? So he kind of scared the crap out of me. So I come home and I start reading. I didn't want to do any ACE block, you know, no, I'm not interested in the medication, but what is it that I'm doing wrong? Okay. So I read up. So I did the things that I never thought I'd do. I completely cut salt out of my diet. I have a gym upstairs that I don't use enough. I've got a beautiful gym, by the way, right? Nice. All the music, right? I'm like, man, that's it. Okay. So been hitting the gym, changed my diet a little bit, no more salt and no more milk. I took milk. I can't believe it, man. No more Captain Crunch. It's killing me. Anyway, that was 4 months ago. I have now lost 20 pounds. And I I started going to the dentist for this new smile. And it's a lot of procedures. It's once a week in the dentist's office. And they take my blood pressure every week. And I've been doing this now for 2.5, 3 months. And they have watched my blood pressure drop. I'm not taking drugs for that.
You don't have to.
You just alter the little things in life that we're giving you joy. That's what you do. And yeah, I've lost a lot of weight. And my physically, you know, working out and losing my blood pressure is back to normal. And I did it all without drugs. And some people will not make those modifications and they take the shortcut with pharmaceuticals to do that. And I don't think that's the way to do it.
Jimmy, the American way is not to do alteration of lifestyle. It's to take, doctor, give me that pill. I don't want to lose weight. I don't want to change my diet. Give me the pill and I'll be fine. That's the American
what's that way. Weight loss? What's that weight loss thing everybody's taking? What's it called? Ozempic. Okay. Yeah, you know what? Just stop eating donuts. You don't have to order 4 Big Macs.
Yeah.
Don't order any, you know, but they'd rather take the short. I'm not talking down to anybody, but there was a reason why you got to that point. And you got to that point because you couldn't stop eating Haagen-Dazs. Well, you know, taking a shortcut and for some reason, those advertisements on TV take hold, don't they?
Yeah, they do. You're right. It's the little things that make a huge difference in your overall health. And it's a little bit of exercise, a little bit of weight loss, watching the sodium. Those aren't huge things, and they make a huge difference in your overall health and longevity. And I think you've discovered that.
Oh, so, yeah. I feel it. I feel so much better. And it's only been 4 months. And it's not like, you know, I'm cleansing and I'm on some keto, vegan, life-changing thing that would make me miserable. No, I just do it. I tell you what made me miserable. Not putting saltines on my clam chowder or my chicken noodle soup. Because that was my favorite thing, man. Crunch, you know. No.
We get unsalted saltines, Jimmy. So look for those in the grocery store.
I don't want. No, I'm not going to buy them. No, not going to do it. See, that's tapping out.
Yeah,
I just don't eat it. No. I'm not buying low sodium anything. I'm not tapping out. Just eat less.
Yeah,
you know, and yeah. Now, what about back to the NDE thing, kind of what we're talking about now, though.
Mm-hmm.
Eben Alexander, who is, by the way, one of my heroes. I love that guy. Talk about the lights are on, right? That guy's lights are just blink. He's just amazing. But one day he was a surgeon, and then one day he was not. Do doctors go through that kind of transition too?
It's really hard. It's really hard to do that because as a doctor, you're used to saving lives, doing all the things that doctors do, and having the prestige of people respecting you and so forth. And then if you suddenly quit, it's a really, really hard transition. And many doctors have trouble retiring because of that. So it's that's a tough thing to do. And they have courses and classes for doctors that are retiring, so that make sure you have something to do. Make sure that instead of having a 90-hour work week, or have a 0-hour work week, and you need to fill it with something. And so so for him, I'm sure it was a tough thing. Now he substituted lectures and writing and so forth for his medical work, and so that kept him busy. But doctors that don't have a hobby or some kind of career that they can go into after they retire are really in tough shape in many cases.
Now, you yourself, okay, in the interest of transparency, I'm just going to let everybody know some personal things about you. You've got 26 children. I don't know how you did that, but and you're full-time, 26, 7, same number, right? But you've got a family, you've got a life, a career, you're a doctor, but then how did you find the time to go and collect all of this data, interview 200 physicians, your own personal experiences, and then find the time to get this written, and then the next step to get it published? How did you pull that off?
I think when you have a project that you think is going to change the world potentially, and that is really you think has a true meaning. And I think again, there's a spirit, there's a force, there's a universe or something that says to you, just like Steve Heim that had to climb that mountain. You have to do this. This book or these stories are going to help people, and so you stay up late. My best writing time was between 11 and 1 at night. When it was quiet. So you just do those things. And I'm sure you've had that experience too, where a show like yours, you've changed people's lives. And I think, why do you get so passionate about your show? It does the same thing that I was hoping to do with this book, is to help someone and to change a life. And I think you do, and I think I hope that I do. And that's how you get the time, and that's how you make the time.
And that's the interesting part, is what have you learned? Because I look at myself as asked this question, and who was I before this career? I mean, I had interest in these subjects, certainly. But once you pack away 3,000 interviews with the brightest and the best, and it's like I'm going to college every single night, right? I've had, you know what I mean? I've a serious master's program doing this show, because I'm listening and asking questions every night. No distractions, no internet, no interruptions, right? I've learned a lot, and it's changed me. What have you learned?
In interviewing doctors, these are stories that were great surprises to me, that these ordinary doctors would have tremendously spiritual experiences that they were afraid to talk about. So I learned that virtually everyone has a spiritual experience. They should write it down. They should tell others about their spiritual experiences. So I've learned that. I've learned there's something else in this world besides just what we see. There's something that we can't see that guides us, that makes you the interviewer that you are, that makes me write a book about doctors and strange miracles that happen in their lives. So I've learned that there's, and I call it God. You can call it the universe or whatever, but I'm hoping that other people will get the peace that I feel, knowing that there's something else out there, that knowing that these experiences where people come back from the dead, that there is a life beyond what we have right now. That turns me on, and that just makes me want to do more and more. And so those are the things that I've learned. That there's something else out there, and I hope to share it with others.
That's certainly profound. And that's just profound. But this is where I'm going to say, except. Except my fear is that an eternal life of happiness would suck. Let me hear me out.
Go ahead.
It can't be good every single day. I'm telling you, Scott, you and I, we're in heaven. We're on the other side, and we've got eternity in front of us of bliss, right? I'm going to turn to you after about 50 years of that. And I'm going to go, Scott, let's go throw a brick through a window. Come on. You know what I mean? I don't know if I could do that.
People grow when do people grow and progress the most? Is it in happiness and everything's going well, the job is good, you're making lots of money, you've got a good wife, you've got great kids? No, the growth that people have is when they're losing their job, when they're in trouble. That's when they reach for something else, and that's when they grow. There was the handcart companies, for example, that moved out in the West. There were the Willys and the other handcart companies going out west with the pioneers. Those people were stuck in the snow, and many of them starved to death. And they will all say universally, and they have in their diaries, that when we were at the worst of the worst, and starving, and people were dying, and my wife died or whatever, I was closest at that point to my God. And I think that's true. You're absolutely right, Jimmy, that when we are in trouble, we are learning and we're progressing. We don't tend to learn and progress when we're having the good times, and that's a shame, but that's the way it is.
So you're saying you would throw that brick through a window with me?
Well, I don't know if I'd do that, but I recognize that when I've been in trouble in my life, and we've had some tough times. I wasn't always a doctor making money. I'll never forget, we had a guy come to we had a beautiful house. We had a guy come to the door that had taken a picture. You know how they with a helicopter, they take a picture of your house and they frame it and they sell it to you. And my wife said, the guy came to the door, here's your house. Would you like to have a picture for $50 or whatever it was? And she said, yes, because we realized we were in such trouble that we had to leave the house and give up our house. And we would have at least a remembrance of the house in this picture. And those were tough times. And I remember working really hard and realizing that I needed to work to achieve some success in my life. And that's when I grew the most. And we still have that picture. It reminds me of the tough times that we grew.
I love that. I love that. Mm-hmm. I love that. And it with a doctor, that's what the show's about tonight. And I love asking these questions about it, where you've got the success, kind of like Dr. Strange. Remember, he's a surgeon and it's his fingers, right? And what happens? Gets in a car accident, can't use his hands, right? Okay. So that's like your big fear, right? And that's what you need to look out for. So you're a doctor and you're saving lives. You're godlike, right? You're doing all of this great work and it gets to you. If you know what I mean. And your ego and all of that. Mm-hmm. And that this you take things for granted, and then you have an NDE, and what are you shown? Well, you know what? God giveth, God taketh away too, and life is very, very short. Every second is precious. Yeah. Do you find that doctors come out of that NDE going, well, I've got a lot to do, and I took it all for granted. I've got to really refocus what my values are.
There's no question. There's no question. When doctors run into some difficulties, um, and everyone does, I take care of lots of doctors as a doctor and a patient relationship. So my many doctors as patients, and one day I'll see someone for a physical and get an X-ray, and they've got metastatic lung disease that's not curable. And so I realize that's where the tumor has spread. It's going to kill them. So they are basically dying. So 1 minute they were fine.
And they didn't smoke.
Some didn't. And radon is a big cause of lung cancers. So we had one woman that came in, and she had no history of smoking, and she had a lung tumor that had spread. It was going to take her life. And 1 minute you're fine, the next minute you're in big trouble. One of my good friends, Doug Johnson, is in the book, and he died about a month or two after he gave me his story. And he went in. He was my patient. I saw him for what looked like a gallbladder attack, and sure enough, he went for surgery, had his gallbladder removed. But his wife is a pathologist, so can you imagine his wife reviewing his slides, and there was a spot of gastric cancer on the gallbladder that she knew was going to be his terminal event, because if it was spread from the stomach to the gallbladder, he had gallbladder disease, but also had this cancer. And so he had to give up his career. He's a very incredibly successful neurosurgeon. The life expectancy for gastric cancer like that is 4 to 6 months. He lasted, I think, 4 months and then died. And his whole life was turned upside down and changed. But what I learned from him was that he always had his dignity. He was a big Marine Corps guy, and he wanted to be faithful to his family. He taught me how to die, and he taught me that you do the best you can. You take care of your family, you take care of all the things, and you live with dignity. And he fulfilled the Marine Corps motto, Semper Fi, always faithful, always. So that happens, and it can happen in an instant. It happened to him in one instant. One day he was fine, the next day he was dying. And
I have a friend, I can't say who it is or what the company is. He's too up there, but he's the lead scientist for cancer at one of the big pharmaceutical companies in the country. Okay. Very rich guy. You see his house. It's crazy. But he's a genius. He's amazing. He's also a lot of fun. And I asked him once, I got the opportunity. We're just, spitballing in a conversation, having a good time. I said, hey, what's the one cancer that scares the crap out of you? And he goes, really? None, except for pancreatic. He said, any other cancer, you catch it? No, we can handle it. And I never forgot that. And he was so self-assured. He said, but pancreatic cancer, that is just, no, we can't handle. And I know you know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
So when you say these things to me, is it because they didn't detect it early enough? And
it's hard to find pancreatic cancer early.
Well, not any cancer, right? Where you're talking about cancer of the stomach or the liver or things. You don't feel it. There's no pain. So how do you even know to go get it checked?
Well,
checked
people come in.
I should say.
Yeah. There are lots of, generally when we see a person for a physical, we do some routine labs and other studies that will generally give us an idea about whether something's bad going on in the person's body, but not always. And there's some new interesting tests that are available now that have revolutionized some of the early detection of cancer. One of those is a test called Gallery. Gallery is a blood test that will pick up fragments of DNA that are cancerous in your bloodstream, because every organ system sheds fragments of DNA into the bloodstream. So if you can take a blood sample and you have cancer, not uncommonly, it'll be picked up by one of these tests. Now they're expensive. This one's $1,000. It's not covered by insurance, so it's not going to be a universal test that we do. But there are some things that we can do. Even pancreatic cancer now, Jimmy, we can detect early, not the cancer, but the predisposition to cancer. So if you have a family history of pancreatic cancer, for example, we'll frequently do MRI scans of the person's pancreas, and we find cysts. The cysts can be precursors of pancreatic cancer. So then we follow a person every single year, every other year, every year, with an MRI scan to look for the change in that cyst. And if there is, then we can treat it early on before it becomes cancer. So there's lots of things that we're coming across now that are revolutionizing how we prevent cancer. But you still can't catch it all. And again, sometimes you see a person, including a doctor, that comes in, they look perfectly healthy, and after you get done looking at the tests, you have to say this person has a terminal cancer and they're going to die. And that's really hard.
Yeah, and we've been talking about illnesses and NDEs with doctors a lot tonight. But what about the accident, right? The car accident, something like that, or they are dead at the scene and are brought back. Do you have any stories about that?
Let's see. Trying to think of an accident.
Struck by lightning.
I've got
hit with a golf ball.
I've hit a few houses with a golf ball, but never a person. I can't think of a story. I've got a couple stories that where people were had a serious illness, were miraculously healed for unknown reasons, and we all see that. I've got a lady that lived in Wheaton, went to school with my wife. Her name is Barbara Comiskey, and she had multiple sclerosis for a long time, and she got worse and worse and worse. She ended up with a tracheostomy tube in her throat so she could breathe, a catheter in her bladder. She ended up with a feeding tube. She was all contracted. She couldn't move her arms and legs very well. She needed oxygen on a regular basis. And one day she was talking with her friends, and she heard this voice. And the voice was a male voice. There were only girls in the room, and the voice said, "Get up and walk." And she knew right away that was the voice of God. That's what she thought. And so she called her girlfriends to call her parents. The parents came in the room. She jumped out of bed. She started to walk. She didn't need oxygen anymore. And every couple hours, she got better and better. She started to dance with her father, and she decided to go to. There was a church meeting that night. She decided to go to church. She didn't have any clothes because her mother gave all of her clothes away, because she knew she would never wear her clothes again, but she had to borrow a dress from the neighbor next door. The mom was so excited because she got muscles back in her legs right then. She went to the church, and she walked in. Everyone thought she was going to die. She was in hospice. Everyone thought she was going to die. And she walked down the aisle. The whole congregation spontaneously started to sing "Amazing Grace." And it was the most incredible thing that
falls in the miracle category right there.
Truly miracle.
Yeah, that's incredible. Miracle. I wonder what the voice of God sounded like. Oh, I meant to ask you that. Any doctors speak to God, and what did God say?
I don't think any of my doctors have spoken to God that I when I interviewed them. So they've had some near-death experience.
What does that what does that tell you?
They speak to God in prayer. And
right.
One doctor, Harold Adolph, he was a missionary doctor. He worked in Ethiopia, in the poorest of the poor areas, and he was the only doctor in the hospital. And he worked 7 days a week. And after 7 months of this, he was burned out. So he said a prayer that morning, and he said, "God, if I can't get a helper today to help me, I have to quit. I'll have to leave. And so please send me an adequate, a capable surgeon to help me so I can take some time off." Later that day, as he was operating, his wife knocked on the operating room door, which is very unusual because she didn't like the sight of blood. And behind her was a guy that had messed up hair and wrinkled clothes, and she said, "Dr. Adolf, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Moskowitz.
Of
He
course.
just flew in. He's a surgeon. He's going to help you out and take over your practice for a month while you rest."
Now, is that God, or is that manifesting the power of the universe?
I think it's the power of God that did that. Why would
Fair
someone that very day show up? I mean, that's a coincidence beyond a coincidence.
Yeah. You say God, I say universe. Could be the same thing.
It's the same thing.
Rectangle could be a square. Yeah.
Yep.
I believe in that. I don't know about when an athlete runs off the field. And so what'd you think about today's victory? I want to thank God. Well, I don't know about that part, but there may be some divine intervention in some of this.
I think some of those things, like athletes, they sometimes get help from God and sometimes they don't. And I think it happens to all of us. I think.
What about boxers though? What about boxers? You're in there pounding somebody's head in, and you thank God after you knock somebody out. I feel strange about that.
I don't think that was God that was helping that boxer necessarily. I think God tends to pick his battles, and I don't think boxing, a victory, would necessarily be a God-given gift. There's
a TV show out. Don't watch it. It's beneath you, but it's an action show. It's called Preacher, and there's a lot of butt kicking that goes on in this show. It's not for you, but it's fun. I enjoy it. But this Preacher, it's 4 seasons, is looking for God. Okay. That's what the show is about. So he encounters demons and this, and there's a lot of ass kicking that goes on, Scott, but he's looking for God. And eventually, I'm going to give it away to everybody that's watching the series right now, but I'll say this. I don't want to do a spoiler, but he does have a conversation with God. Right? Mm-hmm. And God tells him he left, right? He's doing other stuff out there in the universe, and he's just leaving Earth alone. And it was an interesting take on the subject. It was just something, it's creative writing and everything, but it just made me back up and go, well, that would answer a lot of questions with the chaos that we're going through right now. And I just found it interesting, and it was an interesting take. So when you say doctors haven't spoken to God in their NDEs, I'm wondering why that is. I didn't in my NDEs. I didn't hang out with God. No, male or female.
I think you can probably speak with God without having him appear or to you. So like this Harold Adolf that said the prayer. I think he was speaking to God and he got an answer right away.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Yeah. So I think God intervenes sometimes, but not all the time. And I think we have our agency so that we can do whatever we want and suffer the consequences. But I'm convinced that God does intervene sometimes in our lives, like the book story that I told about, getting into the class. I think that was some divine intervention, but we don't always have that. But I think we need to pay attention because that intervention happens more than we realize. I think.
We've got 45 seconds. I'm going to see if you can answer this really quick.
Sure.
Because I can say good night right now and stretch it out, but I don't want to. I want one more question.
Sure.
My house is haunted. I've got ghosts. What are they?
I think ghosts are, many of my doctors have seen ghosts, and I think ghosts are people that have passed into the other world. And I think they come back, and I think they're aware of us. I think, like my mother, for example, that brought us some rhubarb pie. I think we are touched by ghosts, and we may not even realize it. I don't think they're scary. I don't think anyone that's seen a ghost that I've talked to that's a doctor has had a scary experience. I think they're kind and helpful in many cases.
My mom passed away like 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Hasn't visited. I'm kind of pissed at her about it, actually. You know, when your parents die, all right, there are certain rights as a child that you have as a resident of planet Earth. Okay. And you know what one of them are? Your parents come back and go, I'm okay. They come in at the foot of your bed. You know what I mean? Oh, and I haven't had that. My mom cheated me, man.
Keep looking. You may have that and not even realize it.
Yeah, rhubarb pie.
Rhubarb
Scott,
pie.
amazing conversation tonight, my friend. Thank you so much. Where can everybody get the book?
Amazon is the main place, and we've done really well with Amazon. I'm looking to publish 2 other books, Nurses Untold Stories, Clergy Untold Stories, and Soldiers Untold Stories. So if anyone has any stories, or if you have an agent or a publisher that's looking, I'd love to hook up with them.
Yeah, next time you're on, we'll talk about the Cubs, and we'll talk about your agent. All right, now,
All right, thanks.
PhysiciansUntoldStories.com is the website. Links are below, over on our website, and throughout social media. Scott, have a great night and enjoy your weekend, my friend. Perfect night. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jimmy. It's awesome.
That's great. Scott could die, Dr. Scott Kolbaba. And just thank you, Kolbaba. Thank you so much. Enjoy your weekend. And for everybody else out there, it is my Friday. That's right. Now, before you think I'm just all loving it, I'm in the dentist chair first thing in the morning at 9 a.m. So I'm going to sign off now. Say have a great weekend. I'll see you back here on Monday. But for now, all I've got is Go Back Lee Tappy. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Special thanks to Bill, John, Dex, Jessica, Dennis, and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music by Doug Aldrich. Intro, Space Boy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Go Back Lee Tappy.